Welcome everyone to the session titled A Conversation in the Round, Exploring Circularity Challenges Across the Supply Chain. My name is Brendan Edgerton. I'm the Director of Circular Economy for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And in this session, we'll hear from exceptional panelists about how they're approaching, implementing, and addressing challenges in their circular transformations. Representing multiple industries and value chain positions, we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts of effective collaboration in practice. So without further ado, I'd like to move ahead to introduce the panel. With us today, we have Peter Mitchell, the Environment Director at JTI, and a sustainability specialist with over 20 years experience integrating environmental strategies into business operations. With him, we have Gilles Tisserand, the current Head of Sustainability Transformation at Tetra, the world's leading food processing and packaging solutions company. We have Laure Cucuron, is the General Manager of TerraCycle Europe, a global leader in the collection and repurposing of otherwise non-recyclable post-consumer and post-industrial waste. And finally, Katja Seidenschur, the Sustainability Director for Nestle Zone Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. And her responsibilities are to embed sustainability in the business across all categories to support the transformation of food systems and enable sustainable growth. So with that, welcome Peter, Gilles, Laure, and Katja. I look forward to the discussion now. And maybe we'll start first with Peter. Representing JTI, curious to know to what extent circularity is actually on the agenda of your C-suite and board. And with that, what are some of the most challenging aspects in making the case for circularity?
Thank you, Brendan. Sustainability generally and circularity are firmly on the agenda of our board and C-suite. They've approved our group environment plan and also the sustainability strategy for the business. They've recently approved new targets. So we had targets in relation to energy, emissions, water, waste, and forestry associated with our operations and our upstream supply chain. But we now have targets supporting circularity in relation to reusability, recyclability, and recycled content. They also chair our sustainability forum. But we, like many, are at the very early stages of this journey to circularity, and there are many challenges for us as there are for others. We're working hard to lay the foundations of reducing environmental impact, and we're a fully integrated business from seed to pack. And one of the challenges for us and opportunities is to address circularity and innovation at every step of the value chain. The business imperatives for circularity are clear. However, in terms of challenges, infrastructure and regulation that support businesses in making that transition to circularity are going to be essential. And consumers are key, as are governments and regulators. And I think one of the challenges is ensuring that regulation and policy is fair and balanced and applies equally to all industries.
Okay, so maybe on that note, going to a different industry, I'd like to then take this similar question to Katja of looking at your place in the food value chain with Nestle. To what extent is circularity on the agenda of your leadership, and what are some of the challenges that you're facing?
Thank you, Brandon. Yes, so our board is highly committed to sustainability and to circularity. And we have made not only strong commitments in the past on various aspects like packaging, but also very recently a very bold ambition on climate and a specific action plan linked to that. So next to the commitments, we do have a clear plan ahead of us, and we do have some very strong projects and actions in place. In terms of organization, it is part of the regular EBM agenda, and also the ESG targets are part of the personal targets all the way from the top to the employees. Additionally, we have created an ESG Sustainability Council with key EBM members to focus on the strategy, the transformation, but also to ensure delivery of our commitments. And we're also setting up a complete governance across the whole organization to support this new structure and to have it as part of strategic and also operational aspects of the business and all corporate functions. Internally, we have a very strong ambition. So we are saying in EMENA that we want to be regenerative, inclusive, and circular, and support the transformation of the food system. And just to elaborate on the regeneration, which I think is a really strong signal, is that we want to go beyond being sustainable, but we want to regenerate and restore. So that would be biodiversity, the health of the soils, the quality and the quantity of the natural water cycles, and as well, of course, being circular. That touches a lot on packaging, but not only packaging. I think generally we also want to learn from nature, and I will maybe elaborate more on that in different examples. We're also stepping up sustainability in our business. So we are rechanging our brands with purpose and using the brands, as key ambassadors for the consumers and for the shoppers to educate the consumers and the shoppers on some of the areas that might be less known to the consumer to drive the right behavior. And as well, we are working very much collaboratively and going even to enhance that, looking at the whole value chain. And this is specifically on agriculture. So from the climate work, we have seen that our footprint comes 66% from ingredients. So this means we need to work with agriculture, and we would like to support the transition from the current intensive agricultural methods to regenerative ones. To your second part of the question, to the challenge, I think we need to start from a very big picture challenge, which is what is the challenge of society and maybe economics. And I think this is where we need to think, and where we need to shift our economic thinking and the mindset from taking natural resources and as well generally any social, human and natural capital as granted, and we take it for free at the moment, but we need to shift that to value the natural and human capital and the social dimension to ensure that we are reaching the social foundations and as well not overshooting planetary boundaries. So in that sense, I think as a society, we need to value and monetize the true costs. And as well internally, I think there we have some good steps that we are just doing to really monetize the true value, for example, putting a price tag to a ton of CO2 emissions. And I think this will drive change and this will drive behavior and business decisions. So the other aspect, I think, internally is that we know it's going to cost money. We have committed to invest cumulative 3.2 billion Swiss francs over the next 5 years into sustainability. So that's agriculture, but also packaging circularity. And yes, I think this is key to admit and to say that organic growth leverage and as well the cost savings we have are not necessarily going to increase the profit, but they are going to create a better world and a better planet for us.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Katja. I'd actually be curious to dive into that in more detail, but maybe we'll get to it in a little bit. Maybe going up the value chain a little bit, but not as far as agriculture. We'll go to Gilles Tisserand on the packaging side. And interested in getting your perspective now. Are you seeing changes in how your C-suite and board are looking at circularity based on how some of your customers are looking at it themselves?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. I mean, Tetra Pak being a leader in packaging, but also in processing, is really embedded into the food industry, right? And when you know that the food industry accounts for pretty much 30% of the CO2 impact we have, you can understand how important for a company like Tetra Pak to act on a daily basis, but also prepare for the future when it comes to sustainability overall. And that's the reason why, by the way, we have as one of our 4 pillars of the strategy, a clear focus on sustainability, which we call lead the sustainability transformation. It's about the portfolio we put on the market, starting with packaging. It's also about how we operate. And that leads to very strong engagement ambitions on being net zero when it comes to our CO2 emissions by 2030 on our operations, but also when it comes to the full value chain. And that's a key word that Katja said. We need to have a look at the full value chain. And to me, that's the first, I would say, challenge with circularity. We need to rethink it and not think only about the end of the life or the new life. So the end of the value chain, we need to have this overall approach and start thinking of low carbon circular economy. And that's how at Tetra Pak we are at least looking into this. There's a clear acceleration from what we see starting with regulations, and that's true in the UK, that's very true in the EU, that are pushing the boundaries of what brands, what companies such as Tetra Pak must do. And obviously, there's a clear need from brands such as Nestle and retailers to push for better solutions for the planet. And what we do see at Tetra Pak is that, again, building on that full value chain approach, we need to look at sourcing, and that goes with partnership. So choosing the right materials that are having the less impact on the planet, on climate, on biodiversity, on the end/new life. And it's also working with partners like the big recyclers, but also companies like TerraCycle to think about the end of the life. And that is very critical on how we are operating. So from this overall value, obviously fully embedded into the C-suite, we have this approach that goes down to every employee at Tetra Pak to make sustainability at the heart of what we do. And that's, by the way, our motto: protect what's good, the product, the planet, the people.
That's great. Thank you, Gilles. I like there's two themes that I already see popping out. One is this connection between circularity, climate change, or mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, but also aligning everyone's responsibilities towards the organization's sustainability objectives. So both are very admirable and are very consistent with what we see with some of the leaders in the conversation. And now, Laure, at the end of the value chain or beginning of the value chain, depending on how you look at it, you obviously have a very different mindset of your leadership of how TerraCycle came to be and the ambition of the company. Curious to see how that might have evolved with respect to circularity and the priorities for the company, but then also getting into some of the specific challenges that you're still facing as TerraCycle.
Sure, thanks for the question. So yes, we have a positioning that is slightly different. TerraCycle, we've been actually sustainability has been and circularity has been at the core of what we do. And when we started back in the early 2000s in the US, I don't even think that circularity was something, a concept that was well spread and well known. So we, over the years, going back to the mission, our mission is to eliminate waste. It's been the same mission since our creation. It's quite an ambitious one. And over the years, we organize our activity into different buckets. So the first one for us is to look at materials, packaging products that can't be recycled through the national infrastructure in the countries where we operate. We can define ourselves as a very innovative waste management company. And that's really where we started to work with brand owners and different type of companies to look at first to understand why these materials were not recyclable and understand that actually it was because of economics, not necessarily always because of technical issues, which is, I think, a very important concept to understand as we talk about circularity within the packaging industry. And then it was also about finding the model to make it work. And today we are one of the largest collection and recycling company for coffee capsules, for example, working with many companies, including Nestle, actually, crisp packets, cosmetics waste, and so on. So that's the first activity that we're expanding and where we've seen many partners joining us to start implementing these new solutions and also working with consumers and shoppers to engage them in this new habit of recycling. The second bucket is to look at how to integrate more recycled content in product and packaging in the first place, because if you want to go towards a circular economy, you need to collect more and recycle more, but you also need to create a demand for these recycled materials. For us, we do that in a very unique way because we will concentrate our effort in this unique type of waste streams that don't have solutions today. So think, for example, about ocean plastic or beach plastics, where we initiated now a big word supply chain about 3 years ago now. And then moving up to circularity, about 3 years ago, we told ourselves, and that's why recycling and integrating more recycled content is critical. to go towards a circular economy, it's not enough, and recycling is not going to save. It's not going to be the only answer to the waste crisis. So that's where we started to look into reuse models. And I think, what is quite interesting when you look at waste systems being recycling or reuse is that it really shows the challenges of circularity across the supply chain. So, for example, on recycling, you have to make sure that everyone can work together, from people and citizens consumers who are gonna actually collect and recycle in the first place. And you see that in Europe, across Europe, even when we have very good optimized curbside collection system, the collection and recycling rate tend to be quite static, and we it's difficult to increase them. So that's number one. Better collection system, of course, so accessibility and making sure that everyone can access this new system. Recycling infrastructures as well, need to make sure that you have necessary investment in new recycling infrastructure as you're looking at recycling more type of material. There is a lot of discussion around flexible recycling right now in the UK. So how it's going to be financed through the system, and recycling outlets as well. Again, you need to create demand for this material for the circular economy within the packaging and the waste system to work. And I think it's critical, and our role at TerraCycle has been to help this transition to a circular economy by connecting the dots amongst the supply chain and amongst the different players, from consumers, brand owners, to recycling companies, and then product manufacturer using recycled content. There is also a great challenge to see in reuse models. Maybe I will stop here and I can tell you a bit more about that.
Well, I would actually encourage you to continue on, because I was actually going to follow up with you and ask, what would you need from some of the partners within your value chain? But I think the reuse models are something more of what we need to hear in circular economy, as opposed to solely around the recycling conversation. So please continue.
Yes. No, of course. So the reuse model is quite interesting because it's really about changing paradigm, and that's what we're trying to do with the circular economy. Like Katja said, it's a new way of thinking. It's a new way of approaching things at all levels. And with reuse, what we've seen is that actually the starting point for us was to look in the past, was to think about, okay, before we were faced with this really terrible waste crisis, how did we used to do it? And we look at, there was this image of the milkman coming back to us and thinking about packaging being an asset for manufacturers and companies, not a cost, because that's what happened over the years. Packaging became a cost and a responsibility of consumers to dispose out of it. And because it became a cost for companies and for consumers, we try to reduce this cost as much as possible by creating, for example, lighter and lighter packaging. The problem is that now you end up with packaging that are so light, while it encourages great benefit in terms of carbon footprint and great wins for the environment. The negative of that is that you end up with packaging that can't be recycled because the value inside this packaging is too low compared to the cost of collecting them and recycling them. But that's a different issue. But on reuse, for reuse models to work and to be economically speaking viable and sustainable, we need to do it at scale. That's why at Loop, so Loop is the initiative that was created by TerraCycle to develop this reuse model. And the idea was to bring together many players within the supply chain to make it possible and quickly try to scale it. So we went to brand owners and we introduced them a concept. And what was interesting to see is that some of them said, oh, I know how to make reusable packaging. Actually, my team has designed reusable packaging that would be very durable, that could be reused many, many times. The problem is we don't know how to commercialize them because we don't have the platform today and we don't see the economical model for it. So that's where we really, started to design a model, working with brand owners, working with retailers, because TerraCycle or Loop is not a retailer. So we went to Carrefour, we went to Tesco, and we work with them today to really integrate this reuse model within their existing supply chain to make sure that the model can scale as quickly as possible. Now, I say as quickly as possible, but there are plenty of challenges. It's about rethinking packaging. So I said moving from packaging being a cost to being an asset that is owned by manufacturer, and only a few of them have kept this model. If you think about the beverage industry, some of them have kept this model in B2B, for example. But if you think about the cosmetics industry, that's a concept that is completely new. So rethinking packaging, obviously rethinking the design, making sure that we monitor the entire life cycle as well as the packaging through the platform to ensure that it will actually eventually bring better environmental benefit than single use, and also working on cleaning operations. So industrial cleaning has almost completely disappeared. So it's about investing in cleaning operations to ensure this packaging can be clean. And then refilling infrastructures as well. Once the packaging are clean, how do we refill them, and how do we ensure that they can go back into the supply chain for the next consumer to use it? So there's plenty of challenges, and it's moving quickly. But as you can imagine, it takes quite a while to really change the way of doing things, which is critical for us if we want to move towards a more circular economy.
Yes, fantastic. And always appreciate the transformational perspective that TerraCycle brings to it. Gilles, I saw that you were keen to step in and make a point here.
Yes, and actually I was smiling on a few of the comments from Laure. Simply when she mentioned that a package should save more than what it costs. That was actually the reason why the founder of Tetra Pak in 1951 created the company. That was the mindset originally. And I really like that sentence. Why? Because somehow it also shows and reminds the value and the properties of packaging, which is about bringing value to the end consumers, right? And it comes with protecting the product in the package. And the thing is that we are facing many challenges. Reduction of scarcity of fossil raw materials, for example, is one. At the same time, we have a growing population. And anything that improves how we are producing packaging, and it goes with reusable, but it goes obviously with improving the single-use packaging, should be and must be taken by every part of the value chain. And I think that what TerraCycle is doing is fantastic. I think that what Loop is doing is fantastic because it's a complete change of mindset. In parallel, we as a company and companies like Nestle as brand owners, they also have this responsibility, right, to improve the choice of packaging. And that's why from our side, while we are obviously looking into how to address reusable, we also have this responsibility short-term to working with all the players in value chains to improve as fast as we can and as good and as far as we can our portfolio offer. And again, it comes with the choice of the materials, going with renewable, with low carbon, incorporating recycled content, which is something we've just announced at Tetra Pak. And I agree with Laure, it comes with creating the demand, right? So we have this responsibility, and while thinking the end of the value chain, how to make sure that the new product we are putting in on the market are not impacting the quality of the recycling, because then your whole business model of the recycling, which is weak, as Laure described, might be jeopardized. So it's a complex discussion, but so exciting, and it's fantastic to see people around this forum taking so many actions to improve, because there's no one single solution, there's no one single silver bullet, right? We need to take any actions we can with the full value chain partners to improve the offer we put on the market.
Thank you, Gilles. Appreciate that. It's a very good point. You brought up a number of things that I'll save for the recap here. But Peter, going back to you, throughout the last few interventions, we've heard about the collaboration that's necessary with industry and broader value chain partners. How is JTI working collaboratively with some of the industry partners that you have from other parts of the value chain, and what will it take, in your perspective, for comprehensive cross-chain circular scenarios to be implemented?
Okay, can I come to that that point in a moment, Brendan. The reason I was going to interject was just to pick up on this the comment about consumers, because all the panelists have mentioned consumers, and I think this is really important just to pick up on, because consumers are really the catalyst for change. And we can't talk about consumers as a challenge, but meeting the expectations of consumers is the challenge. Consumers are increasingly knowledgeable. They want quality. They don't want to compromise on quality. They want clarity. They want clarity of information, and also they want convenience. And they want to be able to easily sort and separate the wastes. And they want information about what they should be doing. So, one element to pick up on is this consumers being a catalyst for change. But to come back to your question about industry players, we're collaborating a lot in the industry. And I'd like to pick up on something that Katja mentioned, which was the agricultural supply chain. And 7 of the industry players are working together in collaboration on something called the Sustainable Tobacco Program, the STP. And the majority of the leaf merchants and the third-party tobacco companies are involved in this program. And the vision is to become leaders in sustainable agriculture, to improve environmental and social footprints, to contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and overall promote and enable transparent communication of responsible practices across the supply chains. Now, although developed for tobacco, this approach and this risk-based approach is really applicable to any agricultural crop. And we're also working very closely with our directly contracted growers, of which there are over 70,000 in our supply chain. And we're working with them to establish circular models in that agricultural supply chain. So, for example, in Brazil, we collect dust from our leaf processing facility and convert it into organic fertilizer, which is then provided back to the growers. Also in Brazil, we're using corn husks instead of paper in some of our product portfolio. In Bangladesh, we're using tobacco plant stem briquettes as a fuel source for our farmers. And in Malawi, we're using boiler ash to make construction materials for schools and housing. So we are working closely with other players in the industry, as well as closely with our agricultural supply chain and other parts of our supply chain also.
Thank you, Peter. And maybe that's a good segue over to Katja, staying with the agriculture theme. How is your business working collaboratively with other parts of the value chain? And what do you feel is necessary to achieve that full value chain circularity?
Yes, I think there's different elements to the circularity. So there's one circularity aspect which is linked to the packaging, just as Laure was saying. So there we have the recycling challenge, where we need to not just work together with science and as well our internal resources and packaging suppliers on finding the right packaging materials, also that can be used then as a food grade plastic, because we have specific needs for food and beverages to protect. So we are looking for and we're promoting a market for food grade plastic, for example, so that we have the right materials that can be entering into the recycling infrastructure. Then the infrastructure is really key. So we need to, and we are having several actions in place where we are collaborating with recycling facilities, or as well where we are partnering with associations of waste workers to support the inclusion of their waste management systems while they formalize new end-of-life models. So in that sense as well, we're supporting the extended producer responsibilities or deposit return schemes next to the new innovative models like Laure was mentioning, the reduce or even bulk solutions, which is another innovative business model where you actually don't reuse the container, but you just bring your container and then you refill by the bulk, which is already existing for nuts, for example, if you go to a French retailer, for example. So in the infrastructure, we have partnerships with also the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Consumer Goods Forum, Food Drinks Europe. So any multiplier that connects different business partners, we are very active with that. As well, what's very important, and we haven't talked that much about it, is Brussels, and creating the right incentives from the government and having the right efficacy in place to do the right thing, basically. So there's a lot of collaborations on that along the whole value chain with retailers, with consumers, with new business models, with governments, etc. So that's on the packaging circularity. So that's the most visible part. But then, as Peter was mentioning, and as I was mentioning before, there's also really interesting circularity concepts when we connect the agricultural segment with our manufacturing. So, like Peter was saying, how he's using waste in some sense from agriculture to create something positive. We also have really nice examples where we use the manure of farmers, and that would create some overloading of fertilizer, of the manure to the soil, which has a negative impact, especially when it's sprayed during the winter. It's not good for the soil. So we would be taking that manure and then work together with an energy partner to have a biomass digester to create a renewable energy, and in that sense avoid any waste, on fossil energy or other renewable energy. So we have a double benefit there. So I think these models are great, where we connect the waste from one stream to a benefit and a win-win in the next stream of the value chain. And I think in that sense as well, I think whenever you look at some models, it's always good to look at nature, because nature figured it out. Nature doesn't have a waste problem. Nature is full of circular circles that are interconnected and that are helping each other. And any waste that is waste for one actor is the benefit for somebody else. And I think we need to have more of that thinking. And that's what we see when we now look at the different commitments. We look at it from how can we improve the quality of the water? Well, we need to have less pesticides, less fertilizers in our agricultural segment. Once we do that, well, actually, there's also benefit for the soil. And then once we have healthy soils, that also captures carbons, that creates biodiversity. Once we have biodiversity, there's another circle that is triggered. So I think once we really look at the interconnectedness and we're connecting the different commitments or the different targets, biodiversity, soil, water, climate, everything is connected. And maybe the overarching one is climate, because I think there, it's easy to monetize and as well maybe measure the impact. That's maybe easier than other elements. So I would just, I would strongly vote for, let's look at nature. They figured it out. We didn't have this problem, 100 years ago. We really created a problem in the last 50 years because we went off track somehow.
I like that. I like that thinking. In fact, a lot of the circular economy discussions we have, often it goes back to basics in a lot of way of, how do we do things before the Industrial Revolution?
Yes.
And where did we go off so far? But kind of taking your
No, the other element, I think, is just it doesn't, very often it's so overwhelming, when you hear all the problems with climate and, as a consumer, you get paralyzed. You actually don't know, okay, how can I do this? And it's so inconvenient and I don't know how to change my behavior, and it becomes so big and so difficult. But there are solutions. And if we just, grasp these solutions and as well as show, what's possible and how little changes can create a big difference, like using more plant-based food, changing your diet, just changing a little bit. I think, you can mobilize people behind action and you can all be part of it.
Agree, fully agree. Gilles?
Yeah, and thanks, Katja, for putting some very key words, and I really like the word interconnected, because it shows again that we need to work all together to solve these massive issues. At the same time, it is super complex, and to me, there's a challenge which is about the trust that our consumers or sometimes the regulators have in the solutions that some of the key industrials and brands are coming along. And what we are doing at Tetra Pak is not only, of course, working with the partners to improve the portfolio we have, and typically we are working, for example, on having a fully fiber-based packaging. That's fantastic. But we are also working with key external partners on traceability and on building trust. So it's about labels, it's about certifications with external bodies, FSC, Bon Sucre for the raw materials, working with the Carbon Disclosure Project to show and put figures outside available to our customers or to the regulators to explain concretely and show concretely what we do. So we are basically opening our books now. And this approach is, according to us, as we see a better way, or at least a good way, to engage with the final consumers and start to build back that trust into what the big group, big companies needs to do. I think we all have a responsibility. We are aware of this. And companies like Nestle, GTI, Tetra Pak, TerraCycle, we all have a role to play. And anything that can build back that trust is what we need to do. So working together with people around that forum, with external bodies, advocating also is actually a positive move from our big type of companies, right? Because we are all on the same boat. We are dependent on what the planet can deliver, and it's a finite world, so we need to think it through. And our whole, I would say, business model equities rely on that one. So we have this as a clear objective as Tetra Pak, and that's why it's part of the pillar to make sure that we are considering the limit of our world, working with the full supply chain partners to come up with sustainable solutions. Otherwise, our companies will not be sustainable, right?
Right, and I think you touched on dependency, interrelatedness there, touching on the idea of industrial symbiosis and following nature that Katja had mentioned, and maybe this thinking of how we can work better or more effectively with our value chain partners and understanding the needs and wants that the other side has. Maybe Laure, what could TerraCycle benefit from as far as other parts of the supply chain in terms of implementing circular solutions?
Yes, so I think we need to go quicker, and we need as well. I think there are engagement particularly from brand owners, from companies, from government, but there is more we can do to accelerate the change. One thing we've seen is that it's not easy on the day-to-day for people who are engaged in this change. And, we see a lot of companies having their leaders making commitment towards circular economy. And that's great because then it's out there and, engage the organization towards that goal. But it's also about making sure that employees internally are given the means and the resources to make the change, and are given as well the right KPIs to be in a way judged against this change. And I think there's still a little bit of work to be done there. And I think it goes with the economical shift that we have to do as well. Katja was saying it's going to have a cost. Yes, it's going to have a cost. And while the circular economy is will bring a lot of economical benefit, the transition time will have a cost, but we need to be ready to pay this cost. It's the true natural costs that we've ignored for so many years. And why we do that, I think it's about finding innovative and new ways to drive commercial value, and at the end, it's going to be a benefit for everyone.
Thank you, Laure, and maybe Peter, I'll give you the floor for the last input here. If you could get one thing from another part of the value chain in helping you implement your circular solutions, what would that be?
That's very challenging to come up with one individual factor. Let me go through these quickly. Governments need to provide clear policy. Businesses need to invest in innovative and sustainable solutions, models, products and materials. For that, they need the support of investors. But let's come back to consumers, because consumers' behavior needs to change. They're the catalyst, and it's their responsible behavior that should really be encouraged and incentivized.
Very well summarized. So you're taking the words right out of my mouth, and I think just to quickly recap on top of that, this is going to require a mindset shift that we do have to look at this as a transition towards transformation, that it isn't going to happen overnight, but it is important to have ambitions all across the level of maturity of circularity. So with that, I'd like to thank our speakers, Peter, Gilles, Laure, and Katja, for sharing your experiences with us today, and wish you all listening a very good day.